Lewis Hamilton had gone 686 days without winning a Grand Prix. Then Barcelona happened. At 41 years old, in a Ferrari that many people thought would never give him the dream he chased, Hamilton walked into a race Mercedes looked ready to control, and somehow came out with victory number 106. But this was not just a comeback. This was a warning. Because before the race, Kimi Antonelli had won 5 races in a row. Mercedes had pole position. Ferrari had one real shot. And Hamilton's entire move to Maranello was still being judged by one brutal question. Was it already too late? Then one Ferrari strategy call changed everything. A neutralized race period made a pit stop cheaper. Hamilton came in at the perfect second. Antonelli's Mercedes failed with only 4 laps left. And in the space of one afternoon, a 66-point championship gap became 41. That sounds like luck. It was not. Because the real reason Hamilton ended 686 days of pain is hidden beneath the timing, the tires, and the car Ferrari finally gave him. And once you understand what really changed at Barcelona, this win stops looking like an emotional comeback, and starts looking like the beginning of something much more dangerous. Subscribe to the channel. Before Barcelona, this did not look like a comeback story. It looked like a countdown. Every race Hamilton failed to win added another layer of pressure. Every near miss made the question louder. Every strong weekend that ended without victory gave critics another chance to say the same thing. Ferrari was a dream, but maybe it had arrived too late. That was the fear. Because Hamilton had not simply joined a new team. He had walked away from Mercedes, the place where he became almost impossible to separate from the word dominance. 6 of his 7 world championships were built there. Most of his greatest victories came there. The routines, the people, the language, the rhythm of winning, all of it had belonged to that world. Then he stepped into Ferrari Red. And from the outside, it looked beautiful. The most famous driver of his generation joining the most famous team in Formula One. A childhood dream. A historic partnership. A final chapter that sounded almost too perfect to fail. But Formula One does not reward perfect stories. It rewards perfect execution. And Hamilton's first Ferrari season gave him everything except that. The car was difficult. The feeling was missing. The results were painful. There were no wins, no podiums, and no clear sign that the dream was becoming real. The move that had once shocked the paddock started to look, to some people, like a romantic decision made at the wrong time. And that is where the pressure became personal. Because when a driver like Hamilton struggles, people do not treat it like normal adaptation. They treat it like evidence. Evidence that he has lost speed. Evidence that Ferrari made a mistake. Evidence that Mercedes knew something. Evidence that a 41-year-old champion was trying to fight time, and time was finally winning. But here is what most people missed. Hamilton's problem was not hunger. It was not motivation. It was not that he had forgotten how to win. The problem was connection. A Formula One car is not just something a driver sits in. It becomes part of his body. The braking, the steering, the rear grip, the way the car rotates through a corner, all of it has to speak a language the driver understands. And in 2025, Hamilton's Ferrari did not speak his language. When he called the car not drivable, that was not just frustration. It was a champion telling the world that the machine underneath him was taking away the very instincts that had made him special. That is a terrifying place for any driver to be. Because when the car does not respond, confidence starts to leak away quietly. Not all at once. Not in one dramatic collapse. It leaves through small moments. A corner you used to attack. A braking point you no longer trust. A rear slide that does not feel catchable. A race where you know the old version of yourself could have done more, but the car will not let you reach him. That is why Hamilton later saying he almost lost hope mattered so much. It revealed that the drought was not just a statistic. 686 days without a win was not simply a line on a broadcast graphic. It was time. It was weight. It was doubt. It was the slow transformation of a dream into a question that followed him everywhere. And while Hamilton was trying to rebuild that belief, Mercedes was building a new story without him. Kimi Antonelli arrived like the future had no patience. 19 years old, already carrying the kind of speed that makes the paddock uncomfortable. He was not simply learning. He was winning. 5 straight victories before Barcelona. A championship lead that made the season feel like it was beginning to tilt toward him. That created the brutal comparison Hamilton could not escape. The driver who left Mercedes was still waiting for his first Ferrari win. The teenager who replaced him at Mercedes was already controlling the championship. That contrast was everywhere, even when nobody said it directly. Every Antonelli victory made Hamilton's wait feel longer. Every Mercedes celebration made Ferrari's struggle look heavier. Every point in the championship gap made the old question feel sharper. Was Hamilton chasing the future, or being passed by it? By the time the paddock arrived in Barcelona, Antonelli had 156 points. Hamilton had 90. A 66-point gap. Not impossible, but large enough to change the feeling of a season. Hamilton was second in the standings, but emotionally, he was running out of room. Because there is a difference between being close and being threatening. Before Barcelona, Hamilton was close enough to be respected. He was not yet close enough to make Mercedes afraid. And that is what Barcelona had to change. But the circuit itself made that difficult. Barcelona is not a place where a weak package can hide. It asks too many questions. Long corners reveal balance. Tire wear reveals discipline. Straight line sections reveal power. Heavy braking exposes stability. If a car has a weakness, Barcelona usually finds it and shows it to everyone. That is why teams respect it. And that is why this race carried so much meaning. If Hamilton could only look strong at a strange circuit, people could dismiss it. If Ferrari could only threaten when chaos arrived early, people could call it luck. If the car only worked for one lap, people could say the race pace was not real. But Barcelona is different. Barcelona asks for a complete car. And after everything Hamilton had endured, that was exactly what he needed. Not a headline. Not a lucky podium. Proof. The first sign had actually come months earlier, during preseason testing at the same track. Ferrari's new car looked alive in Hamilton's hands. The new regulations had changed the character of Formula One. The cars were different, the energy systems were different, and active aerodynamics gave teams new ways to balance speed on the straights with grip in the corners. But for Hamilton, the most important change was simpler. The car finally moved in a way he could feel. It was more playful, more responsive, more willing to slide without becoming impossible to save. And that matters because Hamilton has always been at his best when the car gives him information through the edge of grip. Think of it like holding a glass that starts to slip. If it drops without warning, you cannot react. But if you feel it moving in your fingers, even for a split second, you can catch it. That is what Hamilton needed from the Ferrari. A car that warned him before it punished him. A car that allowed him to attack without guessing. A car that brought his instincts back into the fight. In testing, he set the fastest lap of the entire 5-day run. That did not guarantee anything, because testing never does. But it gave Ferrari something more valuable than a headline. It gave them belief. And belief is dangerous when it belongs to a team that has been carrying embarrassment. Ferrari had spent the previous season absorbing criticism. Their star signing had not won. Their car had not delivered. Their gamble on the new era had not yet been proven right. So Barcelona was not just a race weekend. It was a trial. A trial of the car. A trial of the strategy team. A trial of Fred Vasseur's vision. A trial of whether Hamilton's Ferrari chapter was still a future masterpiece, or already becoming a story people would talk about with regret. Then qualifying arrived. And Mercedes struck first. George Russell took pole position. Hamilton qualified second. Antonelli qualified third. That front group told the whole story in one image. Mercedes still had the advantage at the front. Hamilton was close enough to attack, but not close enough to control. Antonelli was right behind him, waiting to turn any small Ferrari weakness into another Mercedes statement. And that is the problem with starting second. It looks strong, but it gives you no safety. You can see the lead, but you do not own it. You are close to glory, but still vulnerable. One bad launch, and Antonelli is passed. One poor opening lap, and Ferrari is trapped. One over-aggressive move, and the whole drought continues with even more pain. Hamilton had to be brave. But more than that, he had to be patient. That is not easy when 686 days are sitting on your shoulders. Because the temptation is to force the answer early. To win the race in the first corner. To prove the point immediately. To attack like the whole world has been waiting too long. But Barcelona does not reward desperation. Barcelona rewards control. And that is where the real shape of the race began to appear. Hamilton's path to victory was never going to be a simple explosion of speed. It had to be built. Lap by lap. Tire by tire. Decision by decision. Ferrari needed him close enough to keep pressure on Russell. Hamilton needed the tires alive enough to make the later strategy work. The pit wall needed a plan bold enough to beat Mercedes, but calm enough not to throw everything away. And underneath all of that was the hidden question. Had Ferrari really changed? Not in slogans. Not in hope. Not in preseason optimism. In the exact seconds where a Grand Prix is won or lost. Because that was the thing Barcelona was about to reveal. Hamilton's drought did not end because the universe decided he had suffered enough. It ended because, for the first time in his Ferrari career, the team around him was about to give him a race he could actually win. But nobody knew that yet. Not when Russell lined up on pole. Not when Antonelli sat behind him with 5 straight victories in his pocket. Not when Ferrari carried only one clean shot at the front. At that moment, all anyone could see was the risk. A champion with a fading drought. A teenager with growing power. A Ferrari dream balanced on one red car. And a circuit that was about to expose the truth. Then the race began, and Barcelona did what Barcelona always does. It stripped away the fantasy. No more talk about the dream. No more debate about whether Hamilton still had the speed. No more easy predictions about Mercedes control or Ferrari pressure. Just the first corner, the tires, the temperature, the car underneath him, and 66 laps waiting to expose the truth. George Russell launched cleanly from pole position and held the lead into the first turn. That was exactly what Mercedes needed. Clean air, control, rhythm. The kind of start that lets a front-running team shape the race instead of reacting to it. Hamilton slotted into second. And that mattered more than it looked. Because he had survived the first danger. Antonelli was still behind him. Ferrari had not been swallowed by the 2 Mercedes cars. Hamilton had not lost the position that made the whole strategy possible. The race had not been won, not even close, but it had stayed alive. And sometimes, in Formula One, staying alive at the start is the first victory. But here is where the pressure became more subtle. Hamilton could see Russell ahead of him. Close enough to measure. Close enough to chase. Close enough to make the entire grandstand feel that Ferrari had a chance. But being close at Barcelona is not simple. Because following another car through long corners is like trying to breathe through somebody else's exhaust. The air is disturbed. The front tires lose bite. The car slides a little more. And every tiny slide takes something away from the tire. That was the first hidden battle. Not Hamilton against Russell. Hamilton against tire life. From the opening stint, Ferrari understood that tire management would decide the race. That phrase can sound boring, but in this race, it was the line between victory and another painful near miss. Hamilton could not attack like a man desperate to end 686 days of waiting. He had to attack like a man who knew the end of the race mattered more than the start of it. That is a completely different kind of bravery. Because restraint does not look heroic. It does not produce instant highlight reels. It does not make people jump from their seats. It looks almost calm from the outside. But inside the cockpit, it is brutal. Every lap, Hamilton had to decide how much to spend. How much tire to use through the long corners. How close to sit behind Russell. How hard to push on the exits. How much heat to allow into the rubber before it began to fade. Push too little, and Russell escapes. Push too much, and the Ferrari becomes weaker later. That tiny space between patience and pressure was where Hamilton had to live. And this is where the first real change appeared. The Ferrari was not fighting him the way the old car had. It was not perfect. Formula One cars almost never are. But it was giving him information. It was giving him feeling. It was allowing him to manage the race instead of simply surviving it. That sounds small. It was not. Because in 2025, Hamilton often seemed trapped by a car he could not fully trust. When a driver cannot trust the rear of the car, every corner becomes a negotiation. You do not attack the limit. You ask permission from the machine, and sometimes the machine says no. At Barcelona, the new Ferrari was finally answering differently. It was allowing Hamilton to hold pressure without destroying himself. And that is why the early laps were so important. They did not show a wild overtake. They did not show a dramatic fight. They showed something quieter, but more dangerous for the rest of the field. Hamilton had a race car beneath him, not a problem to manage. Behind him, Antonelli waited. And that changed the psychology of the entire front group. Because Antonelli was not just another driver in third place. He was the championship leader. He had won 5 races in a row. He had arrived in Barcelona with the kind of momentum that makes rivals feel like they are already running out of chances.